It's like between the 50 and 75% of the farmer workers in the United States, they don't have documents. And now they have a paper that said, hey, you are essential.
Hello, print friends, and welcome to the 45th episode of Pine Copper Lime, the internet's #1 printmaking podcast. I'm your host, Miranda Metcalf. I release weekly podcasts with people in the print world doing something a bit beyond the expected. So please subscribe on your podcast listening app of choice. You can find Pine Copper Lime on Patreon, Instagram, Facebook, and you can sign up for the monthly newsletter with print news from around the world, all found at pinecopperlime.com. Printmaking forever, shun the non-believers. My guest this week is Carlos Barberena, a self-taught Nicaraguan printmaker now based in Chicago, where he runs the projects Bandolero Press and La Calaca Press. Carlos grew up in the 1970s during a violent and volatile revolution. At a young age, he fled over the border to Costa Rica, where he and his brothers sought refugee status while they sold their drawings on the thoroughfares. Today, he is well known for his satirical relief prints, which mix the imagery of pop culture with that of political and cultural tragedies. Carlos and I spoke in mid-April, right at the height of the COVID panic, and as well as his story, he also shares some beautiful insights into what we all can do now that the world has forced us to slow down. So, without further ado, sit back, relax, and prepare to get political with Carlos Barberena. Hi, Carlos. How's it going?
Hi, how are you, Miranda? Well, I'm doing well.
Good. Yeah, I feel like that question has such kind of new overtones in our new world, when you ask someone how they're doing.
At least having good health, so that is the important right now. But also sometimes it's overwhelming with everything's going around, happening around. So
Yeah. How have you been doing in quarantine yourself?
Well, it has been a lot of things, planning things before. So it was going down everything. So I'm an artist in residence in a gallery in the neighborhood. So everything it was shut down. So, and also I was in the middle of moving my studio, setting up my studio in a house because we moved to the new place. So it was just like a half of my studio is set up. So it is a kind of things I want to do some work and my plate is in another place.
Right. Yeah.
So it's but at least it's kind of having more time to have some more reflections of what's going on. And I'm from Nicaragua, so I have family down there, and also I check in every what's going on down there because it's a kind of the government is still in denial what's going on. So they are not taking anything to prevent or this pandemic. So it is a kind of a very hard time, I think.
Yeah, I think for a lot of people, because we live in a world where we're so separate from family.
Yeah.
I live in a different country than my family, and my family are in the States, and I'm in Australia, and it's you're so concerned for these people that you love, and you're so far from them, and it's just it doesn't make things easy, that's for sure. Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that we could find a chance to connect. I've admired your work, I feel for years. I can't even remember when I first came across it. I feel it's just always kind of been a part of my understanding of the contemporary printmaking world. But for people who may not be familiar with you, would you mind giving yourself a little bit of an introduction and just telling people who you are and where you are and what do you do?
Yeah, thank you for this opportunity. Well, I'm from Nicaragua. I grew up in a family that it has like a tradition in the arts. I have my two older brothers are artists as well. So I grew up in this kind of environment. So when I was so young, I have to leave my country because like a different situation, the civil war. So I emigrate to Costa Rica. So I was there as a refugee. So for me it was like a very hard a starting point to start doing art because it was the way that I could express myself. I was living during that time. And I was doing more paintings and drawings. And and it was after I returned to Nicaragua, so I started more interested in doing prints. But I never had the opportunity to work in a real a print shop. Always was like a kind of workshops and things like that. So, and I had the opportunity to go to Mexico to a place called Pascuaro in Michoacan. So I was I was doing a residence there, and I learned more about printmaking. So and then it was in 2007 that came the first time to the United States, to do my papers for the my visa here, and I moved with my wife in 2008, and we were living in Seattle for a couple of months, and after we moved to Chicago. So since 2008, I have been based in Chicago, and I had the opportunity to work in a print shop in Oak Park that is called Expression Graphics. So from there, I had a lot of opportunities to work and collaborate with different artists. So I went more into printmaking, and I quit a painting. So from there, so I was I'm still doing prints.
And so when you were growing up in Nicaragua, you said that you had a bit of an artistic family, that your brothers are in the arts as well. Were your parents in the arts? Was this something that they really sort of fostered in your family? Was people making and consuming art?
Yeah, well, my mother's side, there is a couple of painters, one of her uncle. It was a kind of a famous painting. He studied in Germany, and mostly he was doing mostly a portraits and things. And there is another is another part of the family that is more doing a more contemporary art during the 70s. So for me, it was a growing. And this family, my grandmother always hosted poetry studies or just a coming musician. So there's a lot of musicians and poets and artists in the side of my mom family. And my father used to wrote short stories, play guitar, and he did some watercolor. So it was a very my mom, it was just pushing us just to doing a more art. And when I was starting a more a drawing and things, it was during the time of the revolution in Nicaragua. So I went one of those schools the revolution was promoting, and just my mother said okay, I'm gonna have another artist in the family, because my two brothers, they were already in the school, and it was a kind of a tough experience. It was it was not for me. It was just the instructor. It was so rude that I was I was 10 years old, And I remember I was like a kind of like a, he put me to draw a bottle. So I did like a kind of like a version of a bottle, but it was like a cubism. And because I was watching my brothers that they were in the school and
Right.
they were like just like doing this kind of stuff. So the guy came and said like, you don't have any talent, so what
Oh
are you doing
no.
here? And he threw up my drawing, and I said,
Oh.
never, never, never,
Oh
like I'm gonna take a pencil again.
no.
So it
Yeah.
was like a very frustrating, and I was like, no. And it was until I left my country that I was starting like to drawing again, but it was like a just like years after, you
Yeah.
know.
I don't blame you.
Yeah, and it was like a something like a kind of like a, it was very organic because it was like one of my friends. He was taking drawing class with my brother, and we used to play baseball, like and I was waiting for him like hey, we're gonna go late like to the game and everything. So and while I was like waiting, so I started like a drawing again.
Hmm.
And my brother said like hey, those drawings are kind of interesting, so
Hmm.
like we could sell it. And I was no way, like so one day when I have like I think like a 20 drawings, like a small drawing, so he took me to this place that it was like a kind of like a souvenir, like that it
Mm-hmm.
was just selling for tourists, like in Costa Rica. So it was this woman, like a very, like a, like a serious, like in a table. So everybody made a line,
Mm.
and she was looking everything. So it was my turn, and I put my drawings there, and she started looking and just put in a part like drawings. And she put only like a tree in another side and said like, if you work more in this tree, so I could buy everything. So, and I
Mm.
was like, what?
Yeah. How old were
So
you at this point?
I was like a 17,
Oh
18 years
wow.
old.
So you're still just like a kid, yeah.
Yeah, there was like I used to sell the work of my brother,
Mm.
because my brother, it was too bad like to sell his own work. So and I remember we used like to go to the embassies and just like looking for the cultural attachment of the embassy,
Yeah.
and just go there, and we start like a talking and everything, like we were like a immigrants, we were refugees, and everything. And I think mostly it was like a kind of like people was looking at me like a kid. I remember I
Yeah.
was like 10 years old or something like that, and we were doing this, like just to survive, and just like selling like stuff on the streets, like in plazas and things like that. So, but I think it was like very important to me, like that it was like having this kind of experience, like you learn a lot. Yeah.
Absolutely. What kind of images were they? Were you drawing like the baseball players in the field? Was it of what you saw? Were they just completely imagined things?
Nah, it was like a just like a kind of like just things that I remember, like and it was like my first drawing. It was like a India ink, like a very intricate like drawings, like and it was like mostly like houses, but it was like empty, like it was like a kind of those landscape that it wasn't any human being there. It was just like a adobe houses, that the kind of houses that I grew up. So it was like
Mm-hmm.
a more like a nostalgic work. And after one day, I wake up, and it was like all the acrylic sets of my brother. So and then I start painting. So that was like I'm gonna try like to paint it, but it was like a very like a primitive kind of like a painting. So I was like a kind of like a no understand yet, like a kind
Mm-hmm.
of the perspective, composition and things. But but I was learning. So my brother was helping me. So I was like a kind of like a, doing this kind of image of the immigrants, the farm
Mm-hmm.
workers that went to Costa Rica and just like a growing and harvesting the sugar canes, the coffee and different like a thing. So I was like a more focused on that and also like I try like a, to know more about my roots, to explore more about indigenous people.
Mm-hmm.
And that was one of my things, my representation of my work during that time.
So you did come to printmaking, it sounds like, when you were in Chicago, like you'd known of it, but you sort of found your way to it working at the print studio. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was like a before I had some opportunities. So I always like it was kind of attraction to printmaking, but I never like a try like for example in Costa Rica. So I met one of the great masters there, Francisco Amiguetti, and we showed together and we talk and everything, but never like a try like to do a print. And it was until I think it was in 2002. So in my hometown, there is a cultural center. It was a house of this like a priest, like a, that is a poet that just passed, Ernesto Cardenal. So he donated this house to another uh, artist and an actor from Austria.
Mm.
So, and they start like during the time of the revolution. So they start like just like working in the house, and they do kind of like the investment in bringing all these like equipment. And one of the persons that he was involved, he was a printmaker. So, and he brought a convertible press, a beautiful press like etching and litho. You could work both. And he was down there like one time that I was visiting my hometown. So and he invited me like to do some prints. I didn't
Mm.
have any idea about like I know that what was the print, what it was the, but I didn't know what was the process. So and he was like a mostly like working on like etchings, aquatine, and dry point. So my first print it was a dry point, and it's like a kind of like very interesting because it was like a now I'm in love with relief print, you know?
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And it's at such a different feel. For, like
Yeah,
it's so graphic and bold, but yeah, dry point is just that the
yeah.
most delicate. Yeah.
So after that experience, like a couple of years after, I did a show in my hometown. So, and it was this opportunity that, to go to Mexico. So with the idea like to work more, to study more like etching, and coming back to this print shop and teach what was like a learning in my month. So I went to Mexico. It was like a kind of like I was very exciting about there, but when I got there, they were like on a strike.
Oh.
All the people that it was like working there.
Uh-huh.
So but they didn't tell me until I was there. So it was like I had a lunch with the director and everything. Everything is fine. When I got to the print shop, so I was looking for like to my plates and everything, like to start like working, just planning. And I found in my table like two limestones.
Hmm.
So and I was like, what is this?
Yeah, right?
And I didn't have any idea how to work lithograph.
Yeah.
So the only guy that it was there, it was the printer. And he told me, just draw. But I was like, I was supposed like to come to work to learn more about etching.
Yeah.
And he said like, no, we don't have any materials, and this is the only things like that we have. And it was like around like I don't know, it was like a Tuesday or so, and he said like and you have like to work fast because we have like to do the edition like a Friday, and I was like what's going on here? But in the end, it was like a kind of like okay, that's fine. So and I did, and I was like kind of frustrated, like because I was supposed like to go there, and luckily I met some people in Mexico City before going to Pascuaro, and they let me stay at their apartment. So I was like a kind of like a just going around like an old Mexico City, like just getting lost in the
Yeah.
subway and everything. So and just in the food and everything, and going like every museum. And one of the things that is very important to me that had a big impact in my work in the way that design, I I was like kind of like just getting bored painting. So, but I think who pushed me into printmaking it was Posada.
Oh,
So
yeah.
I went like to the National Museum, and it was a big show of him. So, and it was my first time like looking Posada. So it was like I was so amazed about his work, about the satire in his work, and
Yeah.
how he was doing not only like a kind of like everybody just like know about the skulls and everything
Right.
is about his whole body of work. So it blew my mind, and I was like a just like when I returned to Nicaragua, I was talking with my brother. So we need like to do something like to change this, because in Nicaragua the printmakers they were thinking as a painter. It was more like a selfish thing, like it was like a small circle, and they didn't like teach you anything. And I was like visiting these my short residence in Mexico, like show me how to share, how you have like to work with another people, and not only like just like working together, is like you start like sharing ideas and helping each other. So when I came back to Nicaragua, so I was like very excited and tried like to do so. So we start like working like together, and just like start like doing shows around, and just like doing demonstration, free demonstration and everything, and giving away prints and everything.
So when you returned to Nicaragua and you were doing your printmaking and doing the demonstrations, is printmaking pretty well known, or were you kind of introducing it to the first time to people?
It doesn't have like a kind of like the same like history like Mexico. It
Right.
was like some like printmakers, like working on the newspapers, and I have been doing like some research there, and there were a few. One of the things that it was like a big thing in printmaking, it was during the time of the revolution. So the first press for the School of Fine Art came like late 70s. So it was during the Somoza's dictatorship. So the Somoza family ruled the country for 45 years until the revolutions. And that press, it was donated by the Organization of American States. And all the students, they started like doing prints against Somoza, and he was not happy with that. But after the revolution, so the revolution happened in 1979, so all the lefties, like artists, start like coming to Nicaragua to work in Nicaragua, and many like artists living, many like Nicaraguan artists, they were like going outside to learn more about art. They went a lot of people went to Cuba, Venezuela, to the Soviet Union, Russia now, and it was a boom because it was the way like to spread the war in the revolution. So it was like all kind of propaganda. So it was like it's a lot of like a beautiful like posters, like relief print and screen print about the revolution. So everything it was like an original, like it was like a printing, like all the posters and everything. So it was like the big boom in Nicaragua during the 80s.
Yeah.
But after we saw the problems during the revolution, the embargo, the U.S. embargo, the Contras supported by Reagan, and everything. So it was a lot of pressure to Nicaragua. So the people that it was in charge, so they lost the election in the 90s. So and the new governments, they were more like in the root of neoliberalism.
Mm-hmm.
So everything it was shooting down, and of course the first thing is like a culture.
Right.
So it was like any more like a kind of like a. So when the printmaking studios in the School of Fine Art, so they were like dying. So in my hometown, these people that it was coming from Germany and in Austria, so it started like a racing. It's always going up and down, like the printmaking scene in Nicaragua. But I was like very excited, like just like to coming back from Mexico and start like just pushing. And when I moved like in 2008 to Chicago, so I was to start working more with people and collaborating, and I had the opportunity to participate in different portfolios. And I was like, oh man, this is great, like you could share with other people. So I'm starting like organizing like a print exchange. So I did like a 3 print exchange, and all of them I took it to Nicaragua to show, and I involved like Nicaraguan printmakers to show like a different work, and also like sharing their work, showing it here in the States, in another countries.
So when it comes to your own work, how did you sort of focus on getting better and honing your skills without that formal class situation through university? Did you watch videos? Were you talking to other artists? How did you get to be such a skilled relief printmaker like you are now?
It was like a kind of mix, like having the opportunity to work at Expression Graphics. Mm-hmm. So I had the time like to share with another like a printmakers. There is a printmaker from Mexico that helped me a lot, like Rene Arceo. He organized like a portfolio, and he is well known here in Chicago. So I learned a lot from him and another like artist there. And also like I took like a different like workshops, like just to learn more. But I think basically it was like taking every opportunity that I have. For example, in Expression Graphics, it was like working as a co-op, and you have to pay for using the press, and I was broke, so I was like a kind of like looking for a way just to have like a press time. And it was kind of working like as a volunteer, like running the gallery there. So it was like if you see it in the gallery, so you could work at the shop, in the print shop. So, and because it was very small and open, so I have like just like a one eye like watching the door, and another like just like carving or printing. So it was like a kind of like helped me a lot. Like and also like when I remember the first time like I came to the States, it was in December in 2007. The first thing that I did with the money that I had, it was like going to Daniel Smith and buying a baby press.
Yeah.
So that was my whole goal.
Amazing.
My father-in-law, it was like a kind of like I'm not gonna buy some paintings, so I spent all my money buying this small press, and it was like I was like messing around with that, like it was the only thing that I was doing and I was into. And another beautiful thing, it was like a kind of like going to libraries here. Like you could go and you could like take their books home. That doesn't happen in Central America. So I went I go just take the books from the libraries and just taking with me and just studying them at home. So that was the way.
Yeah, so it sounds like it's a combination of learning by just doing and doing all the time and then seeking out the resources like books and that kind of thing. And so in terms of the actual content, the subject matter sort of focuses on these ideas of repression and resistance. And you're looking at things like Monsanto to Palestine to border politics. How did you come to focus on this?
I think that is a combination of trying to express myself and going crazy is all the the experience of life. So I grew up in Nicaragua. I was under the Somoza's dictatorship, so it was one of the more horrible dictatorship in Latin America.
Mm-hmm.
So we went in a civil war, and it came the revolution, the Nicaraguan revolution that it was leading by the Sandinista guerrilla. For many people, it was a big change. So there was a lot of hope in this revolution that is going to change everything,
Mm-hmm.
And there were a different things in the revolution that they were good. It was a free healthcare, education, just reforms in the farms, so giving a land to the farmers and to work on and in a lot of things. But it was different things that happened, that the revolution didn't work because it was firstly it was the embargo, the U.S. embargo, and also because the Sandinistas that after they were leading the revolution, they turned more a radical part of the Sandinista that they took over after. So it was more Marxism and communism. So, and the things affected a lot, in the way Nicaragua could be a change. So it was a kind of just I returned from school, and my mom said you have to leave, and I said why, and it was no, you have to leave to Costa Rica, and I was why, and it was because it was during that time it was the military service. One of my brothers were already in the military service. My older brother, he was already in exile, and they were calling to my mom just to say putting some pressure, because my older brother, he participated during the revolution, but after in the turns that happened, so he was disappointed and he left the country. And so it was a kind of they were if your son is not coming, so we are taking your other son. So, and then I was 13 years old, so it was a kind of insane. And the next day I was in a bus and going to Costa Rica, so to meet my brother. So, and it was it was a kind of things like that. So having a big impact, and also living there in Costa Rica. So it is, I lived there as undocumented for a while before I could apply to the asylum or a refugee status. So, and when I got the status, so it was a kind of start to understand how people treat you, and that the media and everything against all the immigrants, all the Nicaraguans, you are the bad people, but it's the people that is growing your vegetables, your fruit,
right,
to everything for a miserable money, so everything it was just looking, and also when you are an artist, you start meeting another artist, and it was all these kind of people from Chile that came to Costa Rica as refugees during the Pinochet era. So everything it was just changing your mind and just going in having all these conversation with all these kind of people. So it was like a kind of like a changing my mind, and also from my own experience. So and it's kind of the things like just coming to the United States is like a coming to the to the belly of the monster. Like all the all the policies that United States have like with Latin America. So all these kind of dictatorship that United States put in when it's born like a taking out and all the pressure that they put to the country. So it's kind of all those experience and after the revolution, Nicaragua was changing a lot. And after during the 90s with all the neoliberalism like governments, so also more changing more. So doing like this gap more bigger between rich people and poor people. So we are like right now the second poorest country in Latin America after Haiti. So we are always competing, who is the poorest. And we have a lot of like a research. It's just like we haven't been have like lucky enough, like to have like real leadership. Like so we have been trying right and left and didn't work. And it's like a kind of like this kind of like a experience like I try like to push in my work, not taking any like a side. It's just like taking the side of the people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Recently, I was like I was reading about like right now like the big irony, like the undocumented like workers are essential, like that is insane. That is disgusting. That is like until now you are like saying that they are like essential. That it's like between the 50 and 75 like a percent of the farmer workers in the United States, they don't have jobs, and now they have a paper that said like hey, you are essential, but it doesn't mean that I'm not gonna deport you.
Yeah.
So it's more like a disposable like a human beings.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
These kind of things like I'm very like interesting because I have been like in that position, So
Absolutely. When you're creating these images, it's really quite a variety of different issues that your work addresses from all over the world. And I'm wondering how, when you're in it and you're working on it and you're kind of taking on all these really kind of awful truths that are around all of us, how do you kind of keep from being overwhelmed by it? How do you keep up that energy of like, no, this is wrong, and I'm going to create an image that says that and says how I feel, and then I can go over here and I can create another one without just kind of burning out?
oh yeah, it is. It's like a very difficult, like you don't have like enough time like to address everything that is going. And one of the things that happened like 3 years ago, it was like I never feel like I was always like working and working and working. And 3 years ago in Nicaragua, it was like some protest, like it was some protest for elderly people. It was protesting about a new law that the Nicaraguan government was like trying to put, and it was like just like you have like to being retired at 65 years old, and also it was like a kind of like cutting down like a 5% of you were receiving, and also it was retroactive the law. So people that it was already like receiving money from the pension from the retirement, so they were like getting less money. So they were protesting, and the government that is the same guy that it was during the 80s, during the revolutions. And he has been like in power almost for 16 years, I think, right now. So they send like a police like to beat up like the protesters, and also like they go like to more hardship like neighborhoods and bring like criminals and all these people like that they know, so to just beat up like to elderly people. So it was like the students, like at the university, the students jump up in that protest, and the government start like killing students. So it was like a kind of like a very, very like a terrible thing, and that was going on, and I was like a just I couldn't work for months. Like I couldn't make like to create something. I was just every day I was like in my computer calling my family what's going on, because it was like a just going crazy, like it was like they were burning like buildings, and taking like students and disappearing people. It was just like some things that it wasn't happening in Nicaragua in 40 years.
Right.
It was like a kind of the dictatorship that we were living before the revolution. So, and it was like doing, but people that it was like during the time of the revolution, that you feel like, hey, they are different. But no, when they are in power, so it's like a kind of like they don't care about it.
Yeah.
And I think that is the time that I feel like a lot of pressure,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And how do you find a way to kind of come out on the other side of it? Because you found a way to make work again. Is it just sort of time and processing it yourself that allows you to get to the point where you're ready to create work about what you were experiencing?
Yeah, I think like it took time to just think and reflect about what was going on, because I didn't want like just to produce a work and said something. I was, I want like to thinking more in kind of like taking more perspective, because it was like first of all, I'm not down there.
Right.
I don't know what's going on. It was like the media, it was like just ignoring. It was another people here in the United States, like a Nicaraguans, with a lot of like a background, like talking shit about, and there is no happening down there. That is like a fake news and things like that. So, and it was like a very like you don't know what's going on. So I was like a kind of like a very careful, and it was more like I took the positions of people, like I did a portrait of one of the students that he was killed. He was a kid at 15 years old, and for me it was very hard, because it was like I feeling that it was like me, like kind of like when I fled my country. And this kid, it was in high school, and the only things that he wants like to do, it was like going and help the university students that they were protesting. And he took the money like that every day his parents like were giving like to have like a lunch at the school, and he went and bought some water. And when he was like leaving the water, he was shot by a sniper. So, and also like and that is no, and it's still more horrible, because the students took him to the hospital, and they denied like medical attention, because the government said like if the students come in here, so they don't have like to receive any attention. So, and he died there. So it was like a kind of like these kind of strong things, that it was like a kind of like having nightmares about like like you can't do anything, and also like people like trolling you and everything. So so it was like a kind of like but I think also like having like working also like distractions that I could have when it's very tough for me to create something new is like I teach classes. I do collaboration with another artist. Like I work with a group of Latinx printmaker here in Chicago, that we do a lot of like educational programs, and we organize a festival, a free festival in November that is called Gravadolandia, that translates like a Printland. And it's like an event that we do at the National Museum of Mexican Art. And it's like a 3 days that is for free. So we don't charge anything to the people.
Mm.
And we don't charge to the print shops that we invite. We always like try to invite an international, like a printmaker, just to come doing talks and everything. So in some way, it's kind of a distraction for me. Like I
Yeah.
just like going out and printing t-shirts and just getting the funds to have these events. So I think doing a different things is kind of taking out all the overwhelming all my
Mm.
demons that
Right.
I have to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense that the actual work can kind of exercise the demons. There's something a little bit that it
Yeah.
feels like you're doing something, especially when you're so far away.
I mean, the hard thing is just to thinking and resolve that the work that you have to put out.
Hmm.
And after the work is done, is done,
Right.
and you don't have to deal anymore with this kind of pressure. So it's but when it's inside in your mind and your soul, revolving there, so it's very hard.
Yeah, in terms of actually the imagery that you create, one of the things I wanted to ask you about was how, you're dealing with some of these really heavy issues, but you'll often weave pop culture images into it. So you might see Mickey Mouse, for instance, appear in a print that is about something that is so grim. And I just am kind of curious if you could speak to that a little bit in terms of how these pop culture images and icons kind of fit in to the message, and why do they appear in your work, and how you started using that.
That is Posada fault.
Uh-huh. Okay, great.
I mean, it was kind of I was trying to do something more kind of a satire and things like
Uh-huh.
that. I remember when I was doing paintings and I was just approaching these kind of heavy things. So I had a lot of criticism, like that my paintings it was too heavy,
Mm,
these kind of things the always the galleries they want a more commercial, more something that they are gonna sell, and I feel they are it's business.
yeah,
But
for
also
sure.
you have to have time to do this kind of work you want to express, to communicate. For me, kind of as an artist, I need it. I need to communicate something. I don't want to do something that it was just decorative. That is not bad. If you want to do it, do it. And also I have a lot of fun doing skulls and
Yeah.
things that is no heavy. That's probably people it is a kind of things that is beautiful. But I was a kind of trying to come up with something, and I was thinking about the way students at the schools learned about masters, and it's just copying them and learning. And I said okay, I'm gonna try something, but it is gonna be kind of a different thing, and I remember the first work that I did was the Venus from by Botticelli, and it
Mm-hmm.
was for a show in Nicaragua that I got invited, and I was thinking about it, and it was the show, the theme it was about Gaia, and one of the very interesting things it was the people that it was coming to the show, they were receiving a native a tree, so you could go back after the show and just put it in your patio or
Uh,
in your neighborhood, and it was a lot of almost a 2,000 native trees. So it was a big show that it was founded by the Sweden embassy. So it was I got invited. So and I was thinking about a Gaia and how to put it right now, and how Botticelli was thinking, living during this time. And it was like a kind of like in the back of your mind is some image like and then start like looking, and I think it was like some friend or send me a postal from Italy or something. So I have like the actually there, and I started looking, and it was like one of the angel like blowing, like, and I was like trying like oh, and I thinking like oh, this image could be like a very good like for appropriating this image, and I could do some new work and put in all these like heavy things like instead blowing air, the angel is blowing fire, and mushroom in the back like at the Venus with the mask, the gas mask, and all these pipelines and everything, like so I was trying like to take this image to appropriate that image with the same like a kind of like a composition, and but also like put in some more like a contemporary image there and create a new work, but also like using like a kind of a hook, because everybody knows like at the Venus, so people is gonna come, and when they are close they start like looking all these kind of like things like to have this conversation with the public, like and they start like thinking about like why this guy, and some people is like they feel insulted because I'm making this, appropriating this, and like in the history of art, like you have a lot of like masterpieces that it was appropriation of another.
Yeah.
And everybody has like a reference, and I mean it's like a just contemporary work, but it was like a kind of a strategy more, because if I create like something that it was gonna be very dark and going there, and nobody like put too much attention, but it's like a kind of like is the hook, like you take it, and and it's some things that it was like just like a looking stuff and reading stuff. I create another La Macmona. I was reading a blog, and it was like an interview with the director of the Louvre about his position of like put a McDonald's in the Louvre in courtyard and something like that. So it was like the journalist was like asking why McDonald's, it is French. And he said like, oh, it's perfect because McDonald's is a icon in contemporary culture, and the Mona Lisa is the best representation of art, And I was like, oh, I have like to do a print. And it was like near to the show that is like a Day of the Day show. So so then it was, and also like like how with all the kind of experience of like a corporation and things like that, and you could see in my prints a lot of like the golden arch there.
Yeah.
and it's part more like kind of like the contemporary landscape. Like I remember like when I was traveling like to another states for a show or whatever, and just taking the train, so you could see during the night like at the McDonald's sign there, and it was like just coming like a landscape. And it's also like in Latin America it is like a kind of representation of the capitalism.
Yeah, and it's particularly the brands, they become such shorthand. It's such like you get an image that you can use, like the Golden Arches, that just comes preloaded with association for people, both positive and negative. And so when you pop it into your work, it seems like it's a great way to message a whole bunch of different concepts with just a few lines, which is really fascinating.
Yeah, and I think like is more like a behind, because it's kind of like my own experience. I remember when I was a kid, it was only like one McDonald's in Nicaragua, and I went one time with one of my uncles that were there, and during the revolution, because it was like everything it went down, and So McDonald's left the country, but came like a late 2000s, I think, or late 90s. And it was like a huge line. It was like a 3 blocks line to get into the restaurant. And it was like, why, people, why?
Yeah.
And during that time, people, families there down there, they live like with $1. And I was like, I can't, why? Why? What you are gonna spend $5 like to go
Yeah.
for trash food? You have like a amazing food that you could go, but it is the status quo. And I have a self portrait like that is called McCheater, and it was when I was living in Costa Rica. So I was in high school there, and all my friends going to the McDonald's. It was like I think during that time it was like a 2 McDonald's, but it was like a kind of like a representation of the status quo, and also where my friends they were around, and it was so crazy because it was every time that I was like getting like a hamburger or whatever, I got sick. So and,
Really?
and it was like but I coming back because my friends they were there, like a kind of like then everybody was hanging out there, and
Right.
and it was cool to be part of that culture. Like Costa Rica is very Americanized,
Right.
like a countries. But after in the States, I was invited by Melanie Yazzie to participate in a portfolio, and I was about American food, and I was I have to do something, but it is not something that people expect, when you see a criticizing American food, but it's not just just putting someone obese or something more obvious, And I was oh, I'm gonna do my self portrait, and put me in the spot too, because I'm part of the problem too, I'm part of this society about consumerism. And it's you have to acknowledge that you are part of the problem to start changing something. So it's kind of one thing is taken to another. So I was when I started this series, I was just coming with different ideas, and it was and I saw people how they were attracted, and it was more better feedback to my work that before. Before I did a portfolio that is called Años de Miedo, Years of Fear. And it was a kind of oh, it's very sad, it's very strong. And it was a kind of a part of a project that I wanted to do, that it was in the civil war in Nicaragua. It was something that I did in 2000. I did some big paintings, and I was hoping to move around in all Central America, all these countries that they were devastated by the war during the 80s, 70s. But didn't work, I didn't have the money, I didn't have the research to move around, and they were big. So I decided to do a portfolio, a small portfolio. So, and during that time I had a lot of reference from Guayasamín, that is kind of very cubism, very expressionist, and artists from Ecuador. So Katie Kowitz, Picasso, Goya, and they were very dark and kind of in the way that I could them. It was a kind of the German expressionism. So it was directly to the plate, no drawing, no nothing. Maybe just a couple of lines, but I was a drawing with the tool. So and people start oh, he's so depressed, and I remember that I was an article because I presented the first time in Expression Graphics in Oak Park, and the article it was Nicaraguan artists bring the war to Oak Park, and I was what?
Well, as we're kind of coming to the end of the recording time that we have, I'd love for you to tell people anything that you're looking forward to, anything that might be on the horizon. I know a lot of artists have experienced all of these things kind of drying up in the COVID era because we live so much in the future, you know, looking for the next exhibition or the next conference or the next portfolio. But I'm hoping you can tell us anything art related, I guess, or not, that you're looking forward to that we can see sometime in the future.
Yeah, one of the things before everything hit the fan, so I was like kind of putting together my studio, like to have an space, you know, like to work more. Like we have been like living always in an apartments, and I didn't have like I was working, you know, like in a table always, like in the living room or just in a, if we had lucky, it was an extra, like a bedroom and having my studio there. And now we have an space, we have a house. So then we recently moved like in January. So it was like a mostly like a working in the house, like a doing kind of thing. So my this year, it was more like a focus and just putting together my own stuff. I didn't want like I didn't sign up for any shows. Like probably I'm gonna be doing shows, but now we don't know.
Yeah.
But anything big. So I was like last year it was amazing. I was showing everywhere. I had a show that like I put together like 80 pieces that I was so happy to see together the show, and traveling a lot and having like a lot of like opportunities. But I was like this year I want like just to focus on me.
Yeah.
Like just to get inside, getting alone.
Yeah.
I think I I spoke too loud. And to start working in a new body of work and just like going like in, you know, different direction, experiment more. And that was my goal for this year. And I was like a more like what can I say, like just to rethink and about what I have been doing during the last 10 years, like doing remaking. And I think that is very important, like to just to stop sometime and just like to review what you have been doing. So, and you know, I was like just like planning things with the place that I'm an artist in residence, like just like more like keep like a teaching like for the community and things like that. So, but now we don't know like what's going on like with big plans, but I think I have been doing, you know, for years these things. Like right now that I haven't like be able like to print too much, so I have been like just drawing and just like you know, just experimenting things. So
yeah, it sounds like kind of using the time as a bit for reflection and moving forward with intention, which I think is always good.
And it's not only like in a part of like you know, like of the art, is like how we are gonna resolve all these problems that we have been seeing. That is for real. That is all the insane things that is gonna happen, that you could see like here in Chicago, the nurses like using plastic bags and things like that, and they don't have the equipment. So it's horrible. Or just like the people that is more affecting is like a Black and Latino people, you know, like,
absolutely,
because they are more like you know, like vulnerable, like communities. So what we are gonna do change this kind of thing? And it's insane, you know. It's kind of like it's very depressing, but in the same time we need like to work more, and I think we need like to work more in the ground. I'm not interested in like in the president who's gonna be the next president. It's not gonna change anything. And it's more like a kind of like a working here in the ground, like with the people. So, I mean, I'm disappointed with the way that it's gonna go, like the elections, but we see what happened.
Well, no, I think that's like a nice place to wrap up, because it's such, I feel like, really speaks so well about your work, this idea of we need not to focus on continuing this cycle of like the large forms of corruption that don't change anything, but to actually look to what we can change, which is, as you said, like the grassroots. That is where an individual can actually affect things. So I think that that's like a really beautiful place to end on. Can you let people know where they can find you and follow your work and see what's coming up for the horizon?
Yeah, you could follow me, like Instagram is Carlos Barberena. I know sometimes it's very difficult, my last name. And also, like, I have a website with the same name, but that one is not always updated. So we are gonna try, like, now that I have, like, sometimes, like, to work on. But you could look, like, more of my work, and it's a more updated website. Is Bandolero Press.
Okay.
Yeah, bandoleropress.com. So it is like it's gonna be more updated, and probably in the future I'm gonna be like launching some projects. So kind of like doing more interesting things. So.
Well, I can put links to your website and your Instagram and Bandolero Press all in the show notes. And thank you so much for joining me. This has been an incredible conversation, and I've learned just so much. So thank you again. This has been a real pleasure.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation. Like, I was very excited when I was like looking and I saw like the other day like a Martin. So I know Martin. So and also I saw another homie, Joseph Velasquez.
Oh, he's great. Yeah, he was a great guest as well. Well, I'll be in touch, and I look forward to releasing this sometime in the next couple weeks, and I'll let you know.
Okay, sounds great.
Okay, thank you so much, Carlos. Have a great evening.
Okay. You too, and take care. Be safe.
Well, that's our show for this week. Join me again next week when my guest will be Jason Fu. Jason grew up in Sydney, Australia, the son of Chinese immigrants, and he creates playful and darkly humorous works, which examine cross-cultural communications, how we remember the past, and sometimes shitting yourself from drink. You won't want to miss it. This episode, like all episodes, was written and produced by me, Miranda Metcalf, with editing help from Timothy Pauschak and music by Joshua Weber. I'll see you next week.